Have you ever had a moment with a friend that made you question everything? A moment where the lines between friendship and something more became blurred, leaving you breathless and confused? That's exactly what happened to me, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. It started with something as simple as cologne, but it's evolved into something far more complex and beautiful. Let me take you through this journey, from the beginning to where we are now, and maybe by sharing my story, I can help you understand your own experiences with unexpected attraction. My name is Alex, and I've known Jake since our sophomore year of college. We met in a literature class where we were paired for a project on Hemingway. From the start, there was an easy chemistry between us, the kind that makes conversation flow naturally and silence is comfortable. Jake is the definition of a guy's guy. He plays rugby, drinks beer without grimacing, and has dated a string of gorgeous women throughout our friendship. I, on the other hand, came out as gay during our junior year, something Jake took in stride with a simple shrug and cool man. Want to grab pizza? That was Jake, uncomplicated and accepting. Over the years, our friendship deepened. We became roommates after graduation, sharing a modest two-bedroom apartment in the city while we both started our careers. Jake in architectural design, me in marketing. Living together meant movie nights, shared meals, and the occasional deep conversation at 2 a.m. when neither of us could sleep. I always appreciated Jake's straightforward nature, his loyalty, and his ability to make me laugh even on my worst days. And yes, I'd be lying if I said I never noticed how attractive he was. Jake stands about 6 feet tall with broad shoulders from years of rugby. He has this perpetually tousled dark hair that somehow looks intentional, and eyes that change from green to gold depending on the light. But I had long ago filed him under straight friend in my mind, a category that came with clear boundaries I had no intention of crossing. Let me explain why this matters. In the world of queer experiences, developing feelings for straight friends is almost a rite of passage, but it's also a path typically fraught with disappointment. Most of us learn early on to protect our hearts from these impossible situations. I thought I had mastered this particular skill, keeping any fleeting attraction to Jake safely contained behind the walls of friendship. That is, until the night of the cologne incident. It happened about 3 months ago. Jake and I were getting ready to meet friends for dinner at a new restaurant downtown. I had just finished showering and was in my room, dressed but for the final touches. Jake knocked on my door, already fully prepared in dark jeans and a navy button-down that made his eyes look impossibly blue-green. "Hey, do you have any cologne I can borrow?" he asked, leaning against my doorframe with casual ease. "I'm out and don't want to smell like Jim all night." "Sure," I replied, walking to my dresser where I kept a small collection of fragrances. "Any preference? Woody? Citrus? Something that screams, I'm trying too hard?" Jake laughed, moving closer to inspect the bottles. "Whatever you usually wear. The one that smells good." I picked up my favorite, an expensive cologne I'd splurged on for my birthday. It had notes of bergamot, cedar, and something slightly spicy that I could never quite identify. The bottle was heavy in my hand, dark blue glass with a silver cap that caught the light from my bedside lamp. "This one," I said, holding it up. "But it's pretty strong, so go easy." Jake reached for it, but instead of taking it to the bathroom or applying it himself, he did something unexpected. "How do you put it on? I always end up smelling like I fell into a vat of the stuff." Before I could answer, he stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "Show me how you do it," he said, his voice lower than before. I remember feeling a sudden nervousness, like butterflies had taken flight in my stomach. "Well," I started, trying to keep my voice steady, "less is more. Just a spray on the neck, maybe the wrists if you want." Jake nodded, then handed the bottle back to me. "Do it for me," he said. "I trust your judgment more than mine." In that moment, time seemed to slow down. I took the bottle, removed the cap, and Jake tilted his head slightly to the side, exposing the column of his neck. My hand was trembling slightly as I raised the bottle. I pressed down on the atomizer, watching as the fine mist settled on his skin, just above his collar. The scent immediately filled the space between us, rich and complex. What happened next still replays in my mind during quiet moments alone. Jake closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, and then, without warning, he reached out and took the bottle from my hand. Before I could process what was happening, he mirrored my action, raising the cologne and spraying it gently on my neck. "Your turn," he murmured, and then he leaned in. I felt frozen in place as Jake moved closer, his face mere inches from my neck. He breathed in deeply, his nose almost touching my skin. I could feel the warmth of his breath, the slight brush of his hair against my jaw. "That does smell good," he said quietly, still standing too close. "Different on you than it would be on me, I bet." I couldn't speak. My heart was hammering so loudly I was certain he could hear it. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I couldn't name. Then, as if suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment, Jake stepped back, clearing his throat. "Thanks," he said, his voice returning to its normal cadence. "We should probably head out. Don't want to be late." The rest of the evening passed in a blur. We met our friends, ate good food, laughed at the right moments. But my mind kept returning to that moment in my bedroom. The way Jake had leaned in, breathing me in with such deliberate slowness. The way his eyes had held mine afterward, a question in them I wasn't brave enough to answer. Over the next few weeks, I noticed subtle changes in our interactions. Jake seemed to find more reasons to be in my personal space, sitting closer on the couch during movie nights, letting his hand rest on my shoulder a beat longer than necessary, seeking out my eyes across crowded rooms. Each moment was small enough to dismiss individually, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. I started to wonder if I was imagining things, projecting my own feelings onto innocent actions. This happens often when you develop feelings for someone who's off limits. You begin to interpret every interaction through the lens of your own desires. I tried to remind myself of this, to be rational, but then came the night that changed everything. It was a Friday, about 3 weeks after the cologne incident. Jake and I had decided to stay in, order takeout, and watch a movie. Nothing unusual about that. We'd done it countless times before. But something felt different from the moment Jake returned from work. There was a nervous energy about him, a distraction in his usually focused demeanor. We settled on the couch with containers of Thai food and some craft beer Jake had brought home. The movie was some action thriller neither of us was particularly invested in. Halfway through, Jake paused it abruptly. "Can we talk?" he asked, turning to face me fully. "Sure," I replied, trying to ignore the sudden tightness in my chest. "Everything okay?" Jake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he began, "about us. About our friendship." I set my beer down carefully on the coffee table, giving myself a moment to prepare for whatever was coming. Was he upset about something? Had I crossed a line I wasn't aware of? "What about our friendship?" I asked cautiously. Jake looked at me then, his eyes searching mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "I've never felt this way about a guy before," he said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "I don't know what it means or what to do about it, but I can't stop thinking about that moment with your cologne, about how it felt to be that close to you." I sat there, stunned into silence. Of all the scenarios I had imagined, this confession wasn't one of them. Jake, my straight best friend, was telling me he had feelings for me? It seemed impossible. "Say something," Jake urged after the silence had stretched too long. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "I've spent so long making sure I never crossed that line with you, never made you uncomfortable. And now you're telling me that I might not be as straight as I thought." Jake finished for me. "Trust me, no one is more surprised than I am. But I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of reading. Maybe sexuality isn't as fixed as I always believed. Maybe it's more fluid, more complex." I nodded slowly, processing his words. "So what are you saying exactly? That you're curious?" Questioning. Jake reached out then, his hand finding mine on the couch between us. "I'm saying that I care about you, Alex. More than just as a friend. And I'm terrified of ruining what we have. But I'm also terrified of not exploring these feelings and always wondering what if." That conversation opened a door neither of us had acknowledged before. We talked for hours that night, about sexuality, about friendship, about the fears we both had. Jake admitted he had been attracted to men before, but had always dismissed those feelings, filing them away as appreciation rather than attraction. I shared my own journey of coming out, the challenges and the freedom that came with embracing my identity. By the time the night ended, we hadn't reached any definitive conclusions, but we had agreed to be honest with each other moving forward, to explore these new feelings carefully, with respect for our friendship as the foundation. The weeks that followed were a delicate dance of boundaries being redrawn. The first time Jake held my hand intentionally, We were walking home from a restaurant. He reached over casually, intertwining his fingers with mine as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I remember the weight of his hand, warm and solid, and the way my heart raced at this simple contact. Our first kiss happened on a rainy Sunday afternoon. We had been grocery shopping and got caught in a downpour on the way home. By the time we reached our apartment, we were both soaked through and laughing. As I turned to hang up my wet jacket, Jake gently spun me around to face him. The laughter died on my lips as I saw the expression on his face, determined yet vulnerable. "I want to try something," he said softly, and then he was leaning in, his lips meeting mine with gentle pressure. The kiss was brief, tentative, but it sent electricity coursing through my entire body. When Jake pulled back, his eyes were wide with wonder. "Was that okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than okay," I assured him, and this time I was the one who closed the distance between us. That kiss marked a turning point in our relationship. We moved forward slowly, each step deliberate and discussed. Jake was navigating new territory, and I was careful not to push or assume. Some days were easier than others. Jake struggled with questions about his identity, about what these feelings meant for how he saw himself. I had my own fears. Was this just experimentation for him? Would he wake up one day and decide this had all been a mistake? But through it all, our communication remained open and honest. We talked about our fears, our desires, our boundaries. And gradually, a new kind of relationship began to take shape. One that contained all the friendship and trust we had built over years, but with a depth of intimacy neither of us had anticipated. About a month into this new chapter, Jake came home with a small package. He handed it to me without explanation, watching nervously as I unwrapped it. Inside was a bottle of cologne, the same one from that fateful night. "I got one for myself," he explained, "but I wanted you to have a new one too." As a reminder of where this all started. It was such a thoughtful gesture, so perfectly symbolic of our journey together. That night, as we lay together talking about the future, Jake confessed something that touched me deeply. "You know," he said, his voice soft in the darkness of my bedroom, "I think part of me always knew there was something more between us. That cologne moment didn't create these feelings. It just gave me permission to acknowledge them. That's the thing about attraction and love. Sometimes they're hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves." For Jake and me, it took a simple act, a moment of unexpected intimacy with a bottle of cologne, to unlock feelings that had perhaps been there all along. Our story is still unfolding. Jake is still exploring his sexuality, learning to embrace the fluidity that has always been part of him. I'm learning too, about patience, about not making assumptions, about the beautiful complexity of human connection. We don't know exactly how to define what we are to each other now. More than friends, certainly, but we're letting the relationship evolve naturally, without rushing to label it. What I do know is this: love doesn't always arrive in the packages we expect. Sometimes it comes disguised as friendship, revealing itself in unexpected moments of vulnerability. Sometimes it takes a bottle of cologne, a spritz on the neck, and a breath drawn in close to recognize what's been there all along. If there's one thing I hope you take from our story, it's this: be open to the unexpected connections in your life. The boundaries we create, straight, gay, friend, lover, are more permeable than we sometimes believe. The heart wants what it wants, and sometimes it takes us by surprise. As for Jake and me, we're taking it one day at a time, learning each other in new ways, building something beautiful and unique to us. And yes, that cologne still sits on my dresser, a reminder that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest moments. So if you find yourself in that space of uncertainty with someone you care about, remember our story. Take a deep breath, be honest about your feelings, and trust that whatever happens, authenticity is always worth the risk. After all, I never would have imagined that my straight friend trying my cologne would lead us here, but I wouldn't change our journey for anything in the world. Total _char_count, 17,856.